this morning, I'm going to just talk about two ways we dance, right? We relate, that can be a problem, but what we can do to kind of change all of that. Because if you change the dynamic or you change your dynamic, you can change the whole dance. So I hope there's a dynamic that all of you come away with this morning, that you could say, okay, I see that and I can make a change there. So, two dances. Here's the first one. And I'm going to call this dance, It's Not Me, It's You. Okay? That's the dance. Yes, that's right. See, you already are like, yeah, you get this. Yeah. You can do this in a lot of different ways. It can be with your schedule or calendar, right? There can be this thing where you can just say to yourself or to your spouse or the person you're dating, if you would just be more organized, that would solve so many problems, right? Relate to that one? Yeah, of course. Or finances. Finances. And you just think, man, if you would just be just a little bit more frugal or a little bit, if you just make better financial choices, this problem would be so much better. It's not me, it's you. And you go, well, actually, if you would learn how to just spend money and enjoy life instead of making everything just about money, we would have a lot more joy in this, right? Yeah, it's not me, it's you. If you worked with the kids this way, our parenting would go a lot smoother in this, right? It's not me, it's you, right? You can do this about whether or not to even have kids, or here's how we should be cleaning the apartment, or, you're so obsessive about cleaning everything, like who really cares, and you create a problem. It's not me, it's you. And I want to look at something that Jesus teaches here about this. I think this can be real insightful. And what he teaches, this is found in Matthew chapter 7. So if you want to turn in your Bibles to Matthew chapter 7, you can. Jesus is talking about a lot more here. But there's something that comes out, and of course, it's not the direct thing that Jesus is trying to teach here, but there is something he teaches here that applies so well to us when we get caught in this kind of dance in this. And I want to read this to you. So Matthew chapter 7, starting in verse 1, it says this: "Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." Now, let me just say this. I think it's important to say what Jesus is not saying here. What Jesus is not saying is, if you start judging someone, you get judgy. God is watching exactly how you're judging others, and then he's going to start judging you that same way, right? That's not the point that Jesus is making here. This is this is in a relational context. Jesus is talking about relationships. And when we see someone else as a problem, what becomes an easy thing to do? Judge them. And when we judge someone, what's the relational dynamic that always gets turned around in those moments? They start to judge us back. That's what he's getting at here. He's actually describing a little bit of the spiral that occurs, that when we get into a judgmental mindset, we invite that back, and when we invite that back, we experience it, and we want to do the same thing, and we get caught in this kind of loop. And so he says this. Here's what he says about this. Look at verse 3. He says, "Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye," in this. And so he gives this insight about how to approach this. And so I want to offer just a couple of things that we can do to just change that dynamic out of what Jesus is saying. And the first one is this: it's to ask, what's my dynamic, right? Jesus is saying, okay, first thing, understand what's in your own eye. And begin just asking yourself, what's my part in this dynamic of what's going on? What's in my eye? And if you find yourself in that moment where all of a sudden you're in that dialogue and you're feeling defensive and you're thinking of all the reasons why they're the problem, right? You don't pay attention to this, right? You don't care enough about our house to keep it clean, or right, you're so overworked about like finances or this issue that you just like you're pulling all the fun, all the joy out of life, and they're the problem. They're the problem. Here's what I want you to do. Pause. Maybe close your eyes. Like, take a moment where you're not focused on your partner in that moment, because probably in that moment, the thing you're focused on is just like how they're the problem. And you've got this simple solution, right? And if they would just change this, but just put all of that aside for a second. Close your eyes so you're not looking at them, and simply ask Christ, ask Jesus, what's my part in this, right? God, help me just understand what do you want me to know about this moment? And just pausing and just trying to understand your dynamic in it, that is no small thing, because we all have a dynamic. Second thing, and I want you to do this with a courageous heart, with an open heart. Find a way to share a little bit about that with your partner, right? If you can find a way to just share a little bit of that with your partner, I promise you that single dynamic changes all of this. If your partner, if your lover, if your date, if your mate, if your spouse takes a step of vulnerability to say, this is kind of what's going on inside of me in this moment, can I say this to you? Treat that like gold. Because that vulnerability, they just changed a dynamic. And what it takes to be vulnerable in that moment, that is gold in a relationship, right? That's coming at this thing, right? They've been bold enough to say, I'm going to step back and I'm going to take a plank out of my own eye so that I can actually offer something good in our relationship, right? Treat that with just respect and openness, and watch how it reshapes the whole dynamic in this. And again, I want to say this: if you're in a dating relationship here, and there's an issue that is a reoccurring issue in all of this, I just want to say, pay attention to that, because it may be wise to say, you know what, this may be reason why we need to go different directions in all of this. Maybe not, but maybe. And so sometimes we would handle an issue like this differently, like in those beginning days of dating, versus having been married for a while in there. And I'll say this, I wish I would have learned some of this when Angie and I were first dating, because it would have made for a way more enjoyable dating relationship for all the years that we dated. So second dance. So that's the first dance. It's not me, it's you. Let me give you another dance. Here's another dance. And this one, I'm just going to call this one Dancing with My Enemy, right? This is just, it's a thing where we get pulled into this kind of dynamic where we keep finding that we're armoring up. We get on our guard. We're ready. It's like, I'm going to see them as, they might attack me. They may come after me in some way. And we start getting into this dynamic where it's all about like, okay, I'm going to be ready for them in this. I'm going to be protective in this. Maybe it's the thing where I feel like my spouse is trying to control me, or my boyfriend or girlfriend, they get so defensive and then they blindside me like with these cutting remarks. And I'm going to be ready for that. I'm thinking about like what I'm going to do if they say that next remark in this way. Or maybe in a slightly milder way, it's that you just feel like, you know what? I've got to just stand up for myself, because if I don't, my spouse or, my boyfriend, girlfriend, they're going to run over me in this moment. And the danger of this one is this one starts hitting us at our core more and more. And ultimately what happens is we start backing up in a defensive posture that just creates a kind of distance that really, it will be the death of any relationship. It's just a matter, if you can't find your way out of this dance, this one, it just does such damage. And here's how it works. Kind of the dynamic is, you move back, like you'll take a step away to protect yourself, right? To not be vulnerable in this moment. Or you find yourself moving forward. But when you move forward, it's not about moving forward for closeness. It's about moving forward like a preemptive strike, right? It's moving forward in a way that says, okay, I got to get on top of this to keep you from hurting me in some way. And here's why this can be so deadly to a relationship, is that the dynamic ultimately begins fostering a sense of contempt for one another. When you feel yourself, when you see that dynamic happening, I want you to ask this question. Here's the question. Do I want to dance with my enemy or my partner? Do I want to engage in a relationship that's really turns into an engagement about my enemy? Or do I want to be in a dance with my partner? Matthew chapter 5, starting verse 21. I love how he starts over this. Verse 21, right? So just picture, a moment where you see you and the person you love great in that dance. And he says this, you have heard that it was said to people long ago, thou shalt not murder. There's a good starting point right there, don't you think? Just like, okay, we're just not going to kill each other on this one, right? Anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. And he goes on, verse 22, but I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, Raka, and keep that word in mind, Raka, is answerable to the court. And anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell, right? And he's going through this thing about judgment and just like, wow, Raka, and who knows what that means, and fires of hell, and the courts are going to judge. Okay, he's teaching this lesson about this dynamic that is happening. And the key that I want you to take away in this is this word Raka, because it is actually an Aramaic word. Most of the New Testament is all written in Greek. Every once in a while, there's like this direct quote out of like Aramaic or Hebrew. And Aramaic is what they spoke most often. Raka is an Aramaic word that was a very derogatory word that you used to speak to someone that you held in contempt. That's what he's getting at. See, he's getting back to this relational dynamic. There are going to be these moments where, like, you're going to see that person with contempt. Just like, I just because of who you are, like the way I feel about you, I don't even need to consider what you would have to say. That's contempt. You have such a low opinion of them or feeling for them. It's just they're beneath you in some way. And this is what the Gottmans would say. This finds its way into marriages and romantic relationships, right? And it's this thing, you go back and forth enough with hurt or pain, and this is where it goes. It goes to Raka in this. And so he goes on in verse 23 and he says this, therefore, right? So like, you're in this place, therefore, like, and here's where he kind of gives us a different way to move in this. He says, therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother or sister, and we'll just add spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend, right? Person you're dating, has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. Go and be reconciled to them. Then come and offer your gift. What Jesus is getting at here is, right, that person that is like, they're important to you. They're like a brother or sister or spouse or that, right? You have that relationship. And you're at that place where it's Raka. It's like they're like an enemy. You have contempt for them. Contempt is what we reserve for our enemies, friends. That's why this is so telling in this moment. And what he's saying is, you may think there's something more important, because of course they're like, you hold them down there. And what could be more important than your gift for God, right? I'm on my way to give God a gift. That's gotta be more important than that person. And what God is saying is, you know what? I can get my gift later. And that relationship that's going like this, go back and reconcile. And just all I want you to take away from this idea of reconcile, it's the opposite of raka. It's how do you get back to moving toward that person in a way that pulls value up? Because if you devalue that person, right, you have devalued the relationship. It's spiraling down. So how do you turn that around? How do you go back, right? Because what Jesus is saying is, I want you to turn and go back and begin to reconcile, move toward that person, but not in a defensive way, not as your enemy in this, right? Because the question you've got to ask is, do I want to dance with my enemy, or do I want to dance with my partner? So let me offer two things. Because if you find and let me say this too. If right now you're feeling a little overwhelmed, because it's like, so Glenn, you have talked about this particular dynamic as being like the death of a relationship. And I am seeing it in my relationship right now. I get that, right? If right now you're feeling worried or overwhelmed, let me say this. There are some things you can do to change your dynamic that you don't have to do anything to change your spouse or the person you love or care about deeply. There's a couple of things you can focus on that can actually have a profound effect on the overall dynamic of this relationship. You can make a move towards reconciliation in this. So have hope in this. Know that there's something you can actually move toward in this. And the first one is this. It is to actually embrace who you want to dance with, right? So when I say ask the question, who do you want to dance with, your enemy or your partner? I not only do I want you to just say, okay, I want to dance with my partner. I want you to take a moment and think about, what is it that caused you to want to dance with that person in the first place? What is it, right? Because you didn't start out, no one starts out and says, hey, I want to date that person that I hold contempt for. We don't start romantic relationships based on contempt. That's not how it works. There was something that you saw in them. There was something that you experienced in them that actually attracted you to them. There was something that you longed for in that relationship. There was something of goodness or beauty that you saw in that. Get back to that. So this leads to the second dynamic, okay? Second dynamic. And it's this. You've got to tell them. You've got to find a way to talk about this. There's something that you want them to know about what is precious and good in the relationship. There is something you want them to know about where you are or what you're struggling with in this moment here.